Hi, I'm Ashley, and today I'm going to show you how to make this crocheted Kansas City Chiefs logo. I'm doing kind of a logo series for sports teams. So if you have a favorite team and don't see one yet, drop it in the comments and I'll see if that's something that I'd be able to create a pattern for. But today we're going to do this Kansas City Chiefs one. Now I like these small motif type logo crochet patterns because they can easily be incorporated into other projects. So I mean, you could just crochet this and use it as like a pot holder or a trivet or something like that, but you could also continue on and make a scarf. You could incorporate this into a blanket with like sewn together squares. Lots of different options for how you can use this motif after you've created it. So let's get started with how to actually make this crocheted Kansas City Chiefs logo. The materials that we're going to need to make our crocheted Kansas City Chiefs logo is, first off, the chart or pattern. So the written pattern and a PDF version of this chart are available on my blog, which is linked down below. So just go to the description, hit the little more part on the description so that you can see it all, and the link is there. We'll also need yarn, obviously, and I use Hobby Lobby. I love this yarn. It's acrylic yarn, so it's very durable, it's easy to work with, and this one's very soft, so this is what I use. And this is a weight 4 yarn, so that's medium weight yarn. And so I have it in white for the background. I have black. This is the same yarn, it's just the remnants of a skein. So black is going to be the outline, and then the red for the letters. Then we'll also need a crochet hook. So for this pattern, I'm using a size F 3.75 millimeter crochet hook. So that is pretty small compared to kind of what's typically recommended for medium weight yarn, but I want the pattern to be fairly tight, and also this is a fairly wide pattern, and I want the motif to be, you know, not too big. So if you want to adjust and make your pattern looser or larger, use a larger crochet hook. If you want it to be even tighter and smaller, use a smaller crochet hook. In addition to that, we have a yarn needle for weaving in the edges and scissors for cutting the yarn. Pardon the noise in the background, my dog has to have the cone of shame, so she is wiggling around and she still isn't used to the size of it, so it just rubs on everything. So if you hear that, I'm sorry. So for the pattern, when we work off of a crochet chart like this, we're starting at the bottom right corner. So I'm numbered these from right to left and then from bottom to top to make it easier to keep track of. And we're gonna start with white. So the first step is to create your slip knot and make a foundation chain. If you're not sure how to do that, I do have videos on that as well. I have crochet stitches and crochet terminology. They're both playlists, and those are very short videos, 30 to 45 seconds, that show you how to do some of these things. No fluff, just how to do it. And then we're gonna create our foundation chain. So this pattern is worked all in single crochets. So for that, we know our first row will have 27 single crochets because it says it right here. So we're going to chain 28 to start with. That gives us one turning chain. So I made the slip knot and now I'm going to chain 28. 3, 4, 27, 28. Okay, so now we're going to turn and work into our foundation chain. Same thing, if you're not sure how to work into a foundation chain, maybe this is kind of your first venture into crochet, I do have a video on that. Just search Crafty with Ashley foundation chain, you'll find it. But I go over actually 3 different ways that you can work into the foundation chain and kind of what each one looks like after. So check that out. So we're going to work in the second chain from the hook and make a single crochet there. And then we are just going to single crochet in each chain across, and we should end up with 27 single crochets at the end. 3, 4, 5, 26, 27. Okay, so that is our first row of single crochets. Now our second row, you can see, is all white also. There's no black or gray boxes, so we're going to start from the left and work our way back, but it's just going to be 27 single crochets in white as well. So a couple of things: when I turn for single crochet, I do not do a chain and then single crochet. I just pull up the loop a little farther like that, and then turn and make my single crochet. This, for me, works better. I get more even edges that way. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to work over this tail so that we don't have to weave it in later. So to do that, I'm just going to pull it up behind my work. When I go to work my first single crochet, I'm going to go through that final single crochet of the last row just like normal, making sure to go under that tail. Then I'm going to pull up a loop, and then I'm just making sure that this tail is right along the top of my stitches so that it gets hidden in my crochet in that stitch. So you can see how now it's not loose coming out the side anymore. And so I'm just holding it right against the top, making sure that my hook's going under it when I go through to pull up the first loop, and then over it when I'm finishing my single crochet. And I'm going to work that way for this whole row and just keeping that tail against my work. So then when I get done with covering it, when I'm getting toward the end of it, I pull it a little bit tighter. So I'll show you that in a second here as I get to it. Okay, so here I'm getting toward the end of that tail. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it kind of tight and keep working over it. You're going to see that it kind of scrunches up the rest of your work. That's okay. We're going to straighten it out again after, but that allows you to work all the way up to the end. And then when you can't work over it anymore, like here, it's going to stick out, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to now pull it to make the tension right and just kind of straighten it out. And then that makes it tuck somewhere in there, and it's less likely to fall out at the very end. So now you can see that's hidden in our work, and we can just continue on with our pattern without having to worry about weaving in that tail at the end. Which when I finish my last row, I don't want to go back and weave in ends. So I like trying to do it as I go as much as I can. Okay, so that was row number 2. Okay, so our first row, remember, was worked right to left. Second row was left to right. So we're back on an odd number. And with that odd number, we're going to be working right to left again. So here's where counting starts to get important, because we're going to start doing color changes. So on this third row, we're going to have 7 white single crochets, and then we're going to have 6 black single crochets, and then we're going to finish off the row with white. So again, I don't chain, I'm just going to turn, pull it up just a little bit extra so that I get an appropriate tension, and I'm going to start with those 7 single crochets. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now on the 7th, we're going to do our color change. So to do that, we're going to start our single crochet on this 7th one like normal, where we insert the hook, we wrap it around, yarn over, and then pull up the loop. But I'm not going to finish that single crochet. I'm going to add my new color and finish the single crochet with the new color. So I gotta find the end of this mess here because that's just kind of a fallen apart skein. It's been in my scraps bag for a while. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pull up, starting here, I'm just gonna pull up a loop and finish that single crochet with the new color. Okay, so that's how you get a nice seamless color change in the middle of a row. So now on this white one, like if I don't do anything with it, it's just gonna be loose and awkward and mess up our tension. So I'm gonna pull that white thread down a little bit farther, or white yarn. And now we're going to carry along the white yarn because we're changing right back to white here. So throughout this whole pattern, we're not gonna cut and change colors and then add new colors. We're gonna just carry the yarns along the whole way, okay? So to do that, we do it exactly how we worked over that tail. We just hold that color against the top of the stitches and work kind of around it. I'm gonna do the same thing with the black tail from changing colors. So I'm just gonna work over it, okay? So here we have 6 black single crochets. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so on the 6th, again, we're not completing that single crochet with that color. We're doing a color change. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just drop the black and pick up the white that we were carrying along and finish that yarn over and pull through 2 of the single crochet with the new color. Again, we're gonna pull that loose part of the black thread or black yarn, pull it tighter so that we keep a consistent tension. And then we're just gonna keep working over both the working black yarn and the tail of the black yarn so that it's all weaved in, okay? And we're gonna finish off this row with single crochets. And as you go, same thing as when we were weaving in the tail, you can kind of pull it tighter so that you make sure then you can like stretch it back out and get it the tension that you want it at the end of the row. So let's continue finishing those single crochets in white. Now before we make our turn, I'm gonna stretch it back out because you can see it's a U right now, so, or a happy face. So I'm just gonna stretch it back out and make sure that it's nice and even, okay? So that was our first row of color changes. Now you are gonna see, since we are carrying the yarn along, you're gonna see a little bit of that other color peeking through. If that really bothers you, you can cut it, weave it in just along the black areas. But that's a lot of work, number one, to keep cutting and weaving in. But also, you know, unless you're very careful just weaving it in along the same color, you're gonna see it when you weave in the edges also. So it doesn't bother me. I always carry it along. You see it just a little bit, but to me, it's crochet. You're gonna see kind of those holes and gaps in the pattern. And because the colors are all cohesive and made to be the team colors, like I think it kind of adds to it actually. Okay, so that was row number 3. So row number 4, we're going to work from left to right again. And so we're gonna do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 white. Then we do 2 black. The gray color is red, okay? So then we have 5 reds, 2 blacks, and then we go back to 5 whites. So we're gonna be introducing our 3rd color on this row. It doesn't change anything. We continue to carry the yarns along and just keep working the same way. So I'm gonna turn and do however many single crochets I said. I gotta count them again. I think it was 13. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, yes, 13 single crochets in white. Again, I'm turning, so I'm pulling that black yarn around the back, and then I'm just continuing my single crochets here. And then I'm just going to kind of pull up that black yarn to make it nice and snug around the edge there. It kind of makes it tuck in a little bit better. Okay, so now we're getting to our color change. So this is 13. So I'm going to pick up now my black thread, drop my white to finish that stitch. And now I have 2 black single crochets. So 1, and then again, not finishing this stitch, 2. And now I'm going to add red for these 5 red single crochets. Okay, so same thing. I just didn't finish that stitch. I'm taking a loop of red and pulling it through, snugging down the black, and then now I'm carrying along all those yarns, and I'm working with just the red, keeping the other ones right against the top of the stitches. And we have 5 red single crochets. Okay. 5, 5th one. I'm now switching to black, so I'm not finishing that 5th stitch, changing to black to finish it, dropping all the other yarns, and just taking the black up and doing 2 black single crochets, making sure all my other yarns are right along the top here. Okay, so 1, 2. On the second one, I'm not finishing it. I'm switching to white for the pattern and doing 5 white single crochets to finish off the row. Okay. And then I kind of stretch it all back out, right, to make sure that it's all a good tension. I did keep a fairly consistent tension. I have done a lot of these color changing patterns, but it is good practice to kind of stretch it back out after each color change before you like color change again. So once I started these black stitches, then I couldn't really change anything with the tension between there because of how the yarn is looped. So really I should have kind of stretched it back out while I was doing these red ones, but I didn't. But it is kind of good practice to check on your tension with each color change. Okay, so that was row 4, which we worked from left to right. So now we're going to row 5, working right to left. Okay, so again, I'm going to turn. Now this red tail, it's weaved in right here, woven in right here. So I'm just going to cut that later. I'm not going to try to turn and take that with me. It's too short. But I'm going to take the 2 colors that are still being used in the pattern to carry along. So let's turn. Okay. And now I'm going to work 2 single crochets in white. And again, I'm not finishing this second one, so I'm going to hold there for a second. I'm going to pull these working yarns a little bit tighter to make sure that they're tucked in there at the edge. And then I'm going to drop the white, pick up the black, because I need to do 3 black single crochets here. Okay, so pull get the tension right. Okay, 1, 2, and then on the third one, again, I am changing colors, so I'm not finishing it. Pick up the red and finish it with the red. And let's make sure our tension for the black is good. Make sure we're happy with the tension of everything. And then I'm going to do my red, which is 9 single crochets in red. Okay, so this pattern, it's a lot of color changing. If you're not familiar with color changing you know, it might take a little bit of practice. You might do a couple of attempts here to get used to the color changing and carrying along the yarns. So other than that, it's actually really easy because it's all just single crochet. So it's a simple stitch. It's just getting the color changing down. And then counting, remembering where you are in the pattern. So I definitely recommend giving a pattern like this if Kansas City Chiefs isn't your fan. If you're not a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs, you know, I have some other teams and some other kind of similar color changing patterns that you could check out. But it's a good way to practice color changing. It's not too big. And, you know, if you make a mistake, you can just rip it out and always reuse the yarn. So nothing wasted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue working on this, and then I will pick up toward the end and show you how I kind of finish off the color changing and just finish off the pattern. The other thing that I do want to talk about though is because of constantly dropping the yarn and picking it up, the different color in the same direction, your yarns will end up twisted. Okay, so a couple ways that you can go about untwisting them as you're working, because it'll start to just be a tangled mess and get really annoying. You can turn your project in the opposite direction to untwist them, and that works pretty well when you're working with 3 yarns. It's not as effective as if you're only working with 2 yarns. But if I'm working with 2 yarns, I always do it that way. Working with 3, because you're color changing at different times and different numbers of times, sometimes you actually have to take the skeins themselves and untwist the skeins like this and just make it to where your working yarn ends aren't twisted. It's a little bit obnoxious, but if you don't do it a couple times as you go, you'll start just getting tangled, and then your tension will be messed up because this will be stuck and you'll be pulling too hard, or it will be pulling too hard on you while you're trying to work with the yarns. So that's the only kind of inconvenience with these color changing patterns like this. So let me go ahead and work through it, and then I will pick up toward the end of the color changes and show you how I stop color changing, weave in the ends, and then finish off the pattern. All right, so now I'm on my last row of color changes. So we're on 22, so it's left to right. So I'm gonna just turn and start like normal. And I'm gonna continue to carry both colors. There's no more red in this last row, but we just did 3 stitches carrying the red along. So to me, that's not enough of a tail to weave in. So I'm gonna carry it along for part of this row and then cut that red. So I made my turn, and then we have color change and 6 single crochets in black. Change to white. 4 single crochets in white. Switch to black. Again, 6 single crochets in black. My dog's walking around again. She has very clicky nails. Hopefully she'll settle down again. Okay, change to white. And then I'm going to finish off this row in white. Okay, so now that red is weaved in from the previous row, so I'm going to pull that red tight, and you can see it's going to gather the project there. And then I'm going to cut it nice and close to the end. And then I'm gonna stretch it back out, and that will make it tucked in to where it'll be hidden. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the black. So you could carry it along another row if you wanted to. I don't want to, so I'm just gonna pull it tight, cut it, and then stretch it back out. And now I can get rid of the red and the black yarns out of my mess of a pile here. So those last couple rows, I didn't bother trying to untangle my yarns because I knew I was getting close to the end. So I just kind of dealt with untangling enough of it to get it to where I could continue to work. But now I'm having to untangle a bigger mess here, but that's okay. Okay, so now that we finished the color changes, all we have to do is finish out 2 rows of single crochet in white, and then we will fasten off and weave in the final tail, and then we'll be done. Okay, so the last row is done. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut the yarn so that we have about a 5 or 6 inch tail there. And then we're gonna make a knot by just yarn overing, pull up a loop through, and then we just pull it all the way through and snug it down. And then that secures our work. And then I'm gonna use a yarn needle to weave in the end here. I like to use a yarn needle to weave in ends. I just find it to be more efficient. But if you prefer to use a hook to weave in your ends, you do whatever you prefer. If you haven't tried using a yarn needle to weave in ends, you might want to give it a shot, just because I didn't use a yarn needle for a very long time, but I finally started, years into my crochet hobby, I started doing it. I had been just using a hook, and I find this to be just much more efficient and a lot easier. So do whatever you like. There's also not a right and a wrong way to weave in the ends. As long as you kind of go back and forth, you'll be good, just to secure it so that it doesn't come out. But you can zigzag, you can go straight up one and down the other, you can do whatever you want. Horizontal, vertical, doesn't matter, as long as you go back and forth a couple times. So that's all I do. Pull it snug, cut it, and then stretch it out. And then from there, we have our completed project. Now, I will point out that this is my first crochet in a while, and you can probably tell that because my first 2 rows are a little bit looser, and then when I got into the color changes, I tightened up a little bit, and then I was fairly consistent from there. This is something that you can fix with blocking the project, so usually that's using just water, wetting it up, stretching it to the shape you want, and letting it dry. So you can do that if you have the similar problem that I do. I do find that my single color rows often tend to be just slightly looser than when I'm doing the color changes. So something to note if you're similar, and be conscious of making the first couple rows a little bit tighter so that it's a little bit more uniform. But regardless, there is the completed Kansas City Chiefs logo. So again, here is the completed Kansas City Chiefs logo. I just think this is a really fun way to personalize a gift for somebody, or to make something for yourself if you're a Chiefs fan. As always, if this content was helpful or you like this video, please give it a like. It really helps out the channel. And check out my channel for even more content. Thank you so much for watching. You have an awesome day. Bye.